Hello and welcome to the Starting Sisters series, the series where we go from your first purchase to your first 2,000 point army list and everything in between for the Sisters of Battle, also known as the Adepta Sororitas. In this video we'll be looking at how to build your first 500 point list. However, I should mention that the Sisters do suffer a little bit at lower point games due to them wanting to stack modifiers and units in ways that create synergy, but you can still make plenty of fun lists even at 500 points. However, remember that 500 point games are not necessarily balanced, and a lot of times you'll have very boom bust styles of games at that point level, though it's a great way to start learning the rules and understanding how the game mechanics work. So when you do play a game of Combat Patrol, just have fun with it and treat it as a learning experience more than anything else, because all you really want to get out of it is a way to get some models on the table and get some practice in. Now, one other thing I'll say before we get into the video itself, I believe there's a couple of corrections I have to make from the previous video in the series, which was the Elite Choice video, as I missed a couple things that have changed since the Codex came out. The first thing that I missed was the Storm Shields on the Crusaders are no longer just a 3+ invulnerable save, but rather they're now a 4+ invulnerable save that gives +1 to their normal save, bringing them to a 3+ normal save. This makes the Crusaders a lot less interesting, but they still have a little more survivability than the Death Cult Assassins. However, it does push the Death Cult Assassins up the list. The second mistake I made was that the Acro-Flagellants make 3 hit rolls per attack. They actually make D3 hit rolls per attack. However, if we look at other armies that have been released in 9th edition, it seems like they're standardizing this to a flat 2, so in the future, it might very well end up being the case that Acro-Flagellants make 2 hits per attack instead of having D3 hit rolls per attack, as it reduces the number of dice you're rolling and makes the game a little bit more smoother, and that's probably something we'll see when the new Sisters Codex comes out. And finally, one last thing that wasn't necessarily a mistake, but was an error in the way I was thinking about something, was for whatever reason when I was making the video, I thought the Zephyr Penitent was 15 points and not 5 points, so I was very harsh on it. However, when you consider the Zephyr Penitent is only 5 points and not 15 points, meaning it's 1/3 the cost that I believe it was, it makes the Penitent significantly better, and I think it's something that you take more often because now it becomes a point filler versus something that's an actual investment. Anyway, let's get into the video and let's take a look at some 500 point army lists. For each of the lists, I wanted to make a bit of a unique list, using different orders and models to showcase the variety of lists that can be made for the Sisters of Battle. And the first list we'll look at is a Valorous Heart list, as well as the budget list for the Sisters of Battle. And remember, this is more of a way to get you to start thinking about how to build a list versus me telling you exactly how to build your list. So do keep that in mind and don't be afraid to make changes as you see fit. With all of these lists, we'll start off with a patrol detachment, and as we're a patrol detachment, we are required to have an HQ choice. In this case, we'll go with a Canoness, and we'll give her an Inferno Pistol for war gear just to soak up some points, and a Null Rod, as well as making her our Warlord. And remember, the Null Rods are now free, so they're very easy to include in your list. Now, because she is our Warlord, we get to take a Warlord trait. In this case, we'll take Beacon of Faith, and Beacon of Faith will pretty much be your default in most cases because of how good it is. And now for a Warlord relic, we'll give her a Mantle of Ophelia, just to give her a little bit more survivability and making her that much harder to kill, as she already has that Null Rod and a really decent save. So it really brings her up into survivability, and she can take shots at people with a rather powerful pistol. For a troop choice, we'll just take a unit of 5 Sisters of Battle, basic Sisters with a Simulacrum, as it's free, nothing special, just kind of a filler unit to fill up the troop slot. And where things get a little more interesting is the elite slot. For our elites, we'll start with a unit of Celestians, taking 4 regular Celestians, 1 Celestian with a Simulacrum as it's free, 2 Celestians with Melta guns, and 1 Celestian Superior with a Combi Melta. The Celestians will work very well with the Canoness as they can escort her up the table while putting out a decent amount of firepower and gaining rerolls from the Canoness. Don't forget, you can also advance and fire assault weapons with the Celestians and their Meltas, so it gives them a lot of ability to get closer to their enemies and start shooting. Not only that, but they're actually a decently tough melee unit and a decently tough unit overall. So Celestians are going to be a very good unit that's kind of easy to take because they do build out of the basic sister box and they can be outfitted in all kinds of different ways. Now for our second elite choice, we'll take an Imagifier because we are Valorous Heart and we want to take the tail of the Stoic so that we can ignore more of the armor penetration of our opponents. And you can see very much the theme of this list is survivability, because you have that Canoness and you have those Celestians that are incredibly tough, and then you have the Magifier making all of your units even tougher against your enemy shooting so that you can get in close and shoot with the Meltas and other weapons that the Celestians carry. And on top of all of this, you can pay 1 command point to pick up Heroine in the Making and give your Imagifier Indomitable Belief to further increase the stats you provide to your units through your characters, and that's a very good place to be. And all this will make you incredibly resilient. Now that's not where this list ends, because there's quite a few points left for for you to fill up. As we filled up our elite slot, we can't take any more selections, but we do have some fast attack slots that we can fill up. In this case, we'll take some Dominions, and the Dominions are great because they only use up a fast attack choice and are better than our basic sister, while giving us a little bit more mobility in this list. As such, we'll take a unit of 5 Dominions. This unit of Dominions will be composed of 3 regular Dominions, a Dominion with a Simulacrum, and a Dominion Superior with a Combine Melta. And for the most part, these will function as basic sisters, just with a little bit more mobility and stats for a slightly increased points cost. So if you really wanted to, you could always drop these down to a basic sister unit and pick up some more special weapons, but that's really up to you. And as Dominions, Celestians, and basic sisters all build out of one box, it is very easy for you to choose which one you want to play them as. You can interchange them very easily to see which one you enjoy more. Finally, to wrap up the army, we'll take a heavy support choice, in this case being 2 mortifiers, one being a regular mortifier and the other being an anchorite. In this case, we gave both them flails and heavy bolters, as that gives you a little more firepower from a distance, as well as a very powerful melee unit, which is really good because mortifiers are incredibly strong at smaller games due to how much they bring to the table and how little they cost. As a whole, they will really give you a backbone to your army that you would otherwise not have, and the Celestians will provide you with some firepower, while your Magifier and Canis provide even more survivability to your army as a whole, in addition to that Valorous Heart Order. So as a whole, you'll have a very powerful list, despite it being a budget list. And this list adds up to 496 points, so you do have a little bit of room to take something like a Storm Bolter or something of that nature on the Dominions if you were so inclined. Now, what makes this list such a budget list is that it only consists of 3 kits total, in this case being 2 kits of Sisters of Battle and 1 kit of Mortifiers, as you'll see that all the Sisters models add up to 20. So what that means is you're converting your Canis and a Magifier out of your basic sisters to save yourself a decent amount of money, as the models aren't that unique normally, and if you're so inclined, you can definitely pick them up in addition to that and gain a few extra sisters models, though I don't really see it as necessary, and I think it's easier to just spend $180, as that's what those 3 kits will cost you. And I want to be very clear that at the end of every list, I'm going to put a price tag on it, but I'll be using the United States cost of it, so prices might be different in different places, making some of these lists a little bit more expensive or a little less expensive depending on where you live. I'll also be putting a 15% discounted price after the Games Workshop store price, because a lot of small retailers in the United States offer a 15% discount or better on their Games Workshop product, because I'm guessing it's some kind of program that Games Workshop runs with them, as that seems to be the norm, though I can't say for sure as I don't have any inside knowledge on that. Anyway, I thought it'd be a good piece of trivia so you could see how much you would actually pay, as it ends up being less than $180 for these 3 kits, making a rather affordable 500 point list to build, though I should mention that you shouldn't forget that you still need paints and hobby supplies in order to build all of this, so it does bring up the cost a little bit on that end. For our second 500 point list, I decided to go with the Order of the Bloody Rose, and this will be a much more aggressive list. And what's interesting is Bloody Rose is normally the best order to go with, though at 500 points you are kind of limited in terms of what you can take, so I wouldn't say Bloody Rose is quite as powerful as it is at 2000 points. However, it can still be rather strong, and this list is more just to have fun with some units than it is to be very competitive. So let's look at this list, and as always we start with our Combat Patrol Detachment, and as it's a Combat Patrol Detachment we are required to have an HQ choice. In this case we'll take a Candace, we'll make her a Becky by giving her Beneficence, a Null Rod, and Righteous Rage by making her our Warlord, and the nice thing is the Null Rod's free, so it makes it even harder to get rid of her once she's in battle. And a Becky is something unique to the Bloody Rose, as well as an incredibly powerful threat that will put out a ton of damage. Now, unlike the other lists, we will take a second Candace. In this case, we'll take our Candace and give her Heroine in the Making, and give her a Beacon of Faith, as well as a Null Rod, as once again the Null Rod is free, so you might as well make use of it, and in this case we're simply taking her for the Beacon of Faith trait. You can always choose a different character and run that instead if you're so inclined, because they'll work just as fine. However, I think the Canis is probably the best option as a generic HQ choice. For our troop choice, we once again just fill it with our basic squad of 5 sisters with a Simulacrum and a Superior, no upgrades, keeping it rather simple in that sense. Now moving on to our elite choice, we'll take a unit of 5 Zephyrim. Nothing special in these guys, they're just a great mobile threat that can put out a good amount of damage and has decent survivability. For our second elite choice, and the reason why we took a Canis over an Magifier in this situation, we'll take a total of 5 Repentia, and mostly this is because of the points restrictions, though you can definitely increase the number of Repentia as you get 9 in a box, and the maximum squad size is 9. So if you do want to cut down some other units, you can definitely increase the Repentia. However, they are difficult to use at such low point level because they're rather fragile units, and you're probably going to have less targets for them to walk into and just obliterate like they normally do. So you can even probably replace these with something like a second Zephyr box if you were so inclined. And to help our Repentia and Becky get into combat, we have taken a Sororitas Rhino as a dedicated transport, which eats up a good chunk of points. So if you do drop the Rhino, you can can maybe increase the number of repentia you take and hope that they just survive the shooting phase, which is a rather risky prospect, but you can also include some more basic sisters or something of that nature using some of the extra sisters you would have left over in this case. Now that we have some points left over, I've decided to take a unit of Seraphim for a fast attack choice, and this unit of Seraphim will be composed of 2 regular Seraphim, 2 Seraphim with dual Inferno pistols, and a Seraphim Superior with no special war gear. This unit of 5 Seraphim can definitely be dropped if you want to increase either the Zephyr or the Repentia without dropping the Rhino, as Seraphim are best used when you use the Deadly Descent stratagem by deep striking them and having an entire turn to shoot with those dual Inferno pistols. Though in a 500 point game, you are limited to what you can do with deep strike, and you are very tight on command points, so it's definitely one of those things where you have to consider how much you want this versus just using something like more Repentia or having a bigger squad of Zephyr. Now to build this list, you'll need the following kits. You'll need 1 box of Sisters of Battle, 2 boxes of Seraphim / Zephyr, 1 box of Repentia, and 1 Rhino. In the Games Workshop store, this adds up to a total of $280, which is significantly more expensive than the budget list, but remember the 15% discount does exist, and one thing to consider is you do have leftover units for future expansion, as you do have some Sisters left over after converting 2 Canonnesses from the Sisters, as well as a decent amount of Repentia. Now, as our first list was a very mid-range tanky list, and our second list was a very aggressive list, the third list will be a shooting list composed of a combat patrol, taking the order of our Martyred Lady. In this case, for the HQ choice, instead of a Canis, we'll take Junith Irida in order to give buffs to her shooting units, as well as protect them with her flamers in case of a charge being declared. And for our troops, we'll take 2 units of 5 Battle Sisters, simply because we don't have the points to increase them to Celestians or Dominions in this situation, though if you do find some points, you can definitely increase them to one of those, as opposed to keeping them as a basic Battle Sister, because you definitely have the slots open, and both Celestians and Dominions would be preferred to basic sisters in almost every case. And for elites, we'll take 1 Magifier, giving her Tales of the Stoic, as well as making her our Warlord, because Junith Irida is restricted in terms of what kind of Warlord traits she can take, so we'll give the Magifier a Beacon of Faith, which is once again the best Warlord trait available, and give her Litanies of Faith, so that she can have a nice little relic to carry around. You can also potentially take a Canis instead of the Magifier, though one thing I'll say is that a Canis is a little bit redundant, because Junith already provides pretty much everything that the Canis does, while being twice as many points as the Canis, so you can definitely mix things up by changing some of the selections there. Now, for our heavy support choices, this is where we're going to use up most of our points. For our first heavy support choice, we'll take a squad of Retributors. In this case, we'll take 1 Retributor Superior, 1 Retributor with a Simulacrum, 2 Retributors with Multi-Meltas, and 1 regular Retributor to give us a total of 5 Retributors. And the reason we kept it at 2 Multi-Meltas is simply because of the points restrictions that we have. However, you can always increase the number of Multi-Meltas by dropping something else in the list, as 4 Multi-Meltas is definitely okay, but it is putting a lot of your eggs in one basket within a 500 point game, especially when you consider Junith is your HQ choice, and she's essentially buffing some of your regular units, so you're definitely going to have a hard time fitting in a proper unit of 4 Multi-Meltas within Retributors, though it's definitely something you consider and play around with, as it can be a bit of fun bringing that much Multi-Melta action to such a small game, though I think it'll make your list a lot more softer by increasing it to that number. Now for our second heavy support choice, we'll take a unit of 2 Mortifiers. Unfortunately, we don't have the points to upgrade one to an Anchorite, and this gives you a little bit more shooting, while also giving you some close combat options, and as I mentioned before in the first list, Mortifiers are definitely a power unit within 500 point games. This list ends up being 500 points and requires the following kits. It'll require Junith Irida, obviously. It'll require 1 Sister box, an Imagifier, a Retributor box, and a Mortifier box. And going back to, you can use the same models and choose to drop 1 Mortifier, 1 unit of Sisters, and increase the Multi-Meltas to 4 on the Retributors, while taking a unit of Celestians and some more gear. But as I said, that would be putting way too many of your eggs in one basket and would make you very fragile to certain things. This list adds up to $250 from the Games Workshop store, but no matter which way you go, it does give you some extra models, as there's so many different ways to play the models in these kits. Thus, you have a lot of options in terms of expanding your army. So remember, when you see that variance in price, a lot of times is because you're going to get a lot of extra stuff that you can use to expand your army down the line. So there's kind of that silver lining, despite the price point being rather high. For the fourth and final list, I decided to do something a little bit fun and off the wall. In fact, with this list, you can pick whatever order you like, as you'll quickly see that it really doesn't matter which order you pick. Now, unlike the other lists that used basic sisters as their backbone, this is more of a monster mash list where we take a bunch of different powerful units and essentially alienate all of our friends, because we're mustering so many annoying units in a 500 point game. And as always, we start with a combat patrol detachment. For our HQ choice, we'll take Celestine, making her our warlord, which gives her Beacon of Faith as her warlord trait, and that's one we want anyway, so we don't really have to worry about having another character. However, we'll also give her one Gemini Superior so that she can have a bodyguard that she can resurrect in order to optimize some of her abilities. Now moving down our list, for troops as normal, we'll take a basic unit of 5 Battle Sisters, giving them a simulacrum because it's free, and on our superior, we'll give them something like an Inferno Pistol because we just have a few points at the end of this list to fill out, and we might as well give her something for once. Now where the list becomes really spicy is for our heavy support choice. We'll take 2 units of Mortifiers, each unit having 2 models, one being an Anchorite and one being a Mortifier, and this gives us a total of 4 Mortifiers, 2 of which are Anchorites, and as we know, Mortifiers are incredibly brutal units when armed with heavy bolters and flails. Now, this list is pretty much just a bunch of big monster units that get into combat and absolutely obliterate anything in their path with a whole ton of attacks, as well as a lot of survivability and even a decent amount of firepower due to the heavy bolters on those Mortifiers that we have there. So you're firing a total of 8 heavy bolters while advancing across the board with a unit that puts out a ton of melee attacks and has a good strength and toughness profile, as well as dishing out mortal wounds when destroyed in melee combat. So as a whole, this list is incredibly powerful, but there are going to be some opponents that can potentially shoot you off the board before you get across the board and engage them in combat, though even then you still have that decent amount of firepower, and you'll generally be able to destroy both swarms and elite units rather well using your Mortifiers, as well as Celestine, who's just an incredibly powerful unit overall that has to be destroyed twice in most situations before she actually goes down, while still being an incredibly tanky and brutal unit to fight against. Anyway, I think this list will be a ton of fun to play. It ends up being 498 points, with the kits needed being 1 Celestine, 1 box of Sisters, and 2 Mortifiers, going to a total of $235 for the cost of the list off of the Games Workshop store. It's definitely one if you enjoy Mortifiers and Celestine. It'll be a lot of fun to give it a shot, and it will leave you with an extra 5 Sisters of Battle, which you can do pretty much anything with. And if you watch to the end of this video, let me know in the comments below which list was your favorite, or if you would make any changes to any of these lists in order to improve it more to your playstyle. Because when I was building these 500 points lists, I did find it a little bit restrictive because the Sisters do have somewhat of a limited range, which I'm hoping will be changed with all of the models that we've been seeing previewed, such as the Palatine or the new Sisters Walker, which would be really interesting to see if it's a troop choice so that they can actually take something different in troops versus just always taking a basic unit of 5 Battle Sisters as we've seen in this case. Anyway, if you've enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe as it really does help the channel out, and if you think someone would benefit from either this guide or another one of the army guides that I made, do share the videos as it helps other players out. And as always, thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye.